Good evening. My name is John Norris, and I'm the county attorney. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. Let me first introduce the board president, Commissioner President Buddy Hance.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming out tonight. I think we do have some people on Zoom, so to all those Zoomers out there, we welcome you here too. So tonight we're here to talk about the Police Accountability Board. Since you're here, you know that last year the legislature passed some legislation that required every jurisdiction to set up a Police Accountability Board and a charging committee. So the Board of County Commissioners decided that we wanted to get some public input. As our attorney, Mr. Norris, is going to go through the legislation after I finish my comments, and you'll see a lot of the requirements are already laid out in the legislation, but the size of the board, demographics, there are certain things that we have to set up ourselves. So the Board of Commissioners decided that we wanted to get some public feedback, because at the end of the day, if this board doesn't have joint ownership between county government and the citizens, it won't be, it'll be useless. So it's our effort to get in all the feedback we can from you all to see what you expect, what your expectations are, what the board should look like. So without a whole lot of ado, I'm going to bring back Mr. Norris, and he's going to go through the legislation so you have a clear picture of where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, President Hance. Again, my name is John Norris. I am the county attorney. I do want to say how much I appreciate everybody coming out this evening, and I believe we have 17 or so folks on Zoom. Thank you. We are recording this. This is going to be available to watch on the county website, and it will be available through our YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe so you get all the updates, and we can start offering closed captioning at no additional cost to the taxpayers. So like and subscribe the county's YouTube channel. This is a very serious topic. We're going to go through what the legislature did in Annapolis in just a moment. But again, we do take this very seriously. We were fortunate enough to have Commissioner Hutchins come up with an initial draft. That was his read on how this could be implemented. He unfortunately left us as a county commissioner, still with us in body and spirit, but is no longer with the board. So we have a starting point, whether it's a good starting point and rather reflects what the county wants is why we're doing this. So let me start with the Police Accountability Board. Was established by legislature in Chapter 89 of the laws of Maryland of 2021. And it requires the Board of County Commissioners to establish the membership, requires that they establish the budget and staff, requires that they appoint a chair with relevant experience as part of the legislation, and establish the procedures for record keeping. If we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. For the Accountability Board, they must establish the membership, the budget, and the staff, and appoint the chair with relevant experience. Sorry, we already did that one. Hold quarterly meetings with the head of law enforcement agencies and otherwise work with law enforcement agencies and county government to improve matters of policing. Appoint the members of the Administrative Charging Committee and any trial boards. Receive the complaints of police misconduct. Review quarterly outcomes of disciplinary matters that are considered by the charging committees, and by December 31, make a report to the county commissioners on policy changes to improve accountability in the county. Next slide, please. Then we get to the Administrative Charging Committee. The charging committee is required by state law to be 5 persons. The chair of the Police Accountability Board sits as the chair of the charging committee. There is an annotation in the legislation that the chair can pass that responsibility on to another member of the Police Accountability Board. But for all intents and purposes, it's the chair or the chair's designee of the Accountability Board that sits as the chair of the charging committee. The Accountability Board also appoints 2 civilian members to the Charging Committee, and the Board of County Commissioners appoints 2 members to the Charging Committee. That's civilian members. Next slide, please. What's the Charging Committee's role? Well, the Charging Committee is to look at findings of police enforcement agency investigation, to review body camera footage, to determine whether or not an administrative charge is appropriate for a police officer who's the subject of an investigation that's been received by the Accountability Board. And if they're charged, to recommend the discipline using a matrix that's going to have to be approved by the state of Maryland, issue a written opinion that describes its findings in detail, and forward that opinion to the chief law enforcement officer of the agency for which that officer serves. That could be the superintendent of state police, it could be the sheriff. Next slide, please. The Administrative Charging Committee may also request additional information from the law enforcement agency than they received from the Accountability Board or from the complaint that was submitted. They can find that the allegations against the police officer are unfounded or exonerate the police officer if the officer is not administratively charged. They also record in writing any failure of supervision that would have caused or contributed to the allegation of misconduct. Next slide, please. Within 15 days after the Charging Committee issues its charges against an officer, the chief of the law enforcement agency has to decide what the administrative discipline is going to be. They apply the matrix, same matrix that the Charging Committee did, and they are limited to what they can provide. The chief of the law enforcement agency cannot be any more lenient than the Charging Committee's recommendation, and they have to be no more punitive than the matrix would allow. The officer then can seek a review by the trial board. The Accountability Board appoints 1 civilian to the trial board. Next slide, please. So this is an eye test, but it is in the back of the room if you'd like to take a look at it. On the far left are the citizens. That's everybody in Calvert County who elects the Board of County Commissioners, which is the next box. On the top, the Board of County Commissioners appoints some members to the Police Accountability Board. Is it 9, as in Commissioner Hutchins' proposal? Is it 7? Is it 5? Is it 13? We've gotten some comments that say it should be more. We've gotten some comments that 7 is the right number. We're truly looking for the input on that. The arrow down and to the right means the Board of County Commissioners appoint 2 members to the Administrative Charging Committee. The arrow coming down from the box at the top is the Police Accountability Board's chair coming over to serve on the Administrative Charging Committee, and also 2 members of the public that the Accountability Board will appoint to the Charging Committee. And on the right is the Trial Board, for which the Accountability Board appoints 1 member. So it all starts with the citizens. So in an effort to try and get it right, we have started a survey. That survey's been online. It's also available in the back if anybody hasn't seen it. We're trying to initiate some discussion. And the first question of the survey asks, what's the right number of people for the Police Accountability Board? Is it 7? Should it be more? Should it be less? The second question is, should there be minimum qualifications for members of the Accountability Board? This is where you do have to recall that the state law says that the commissioners are to appoint a chair with relevant experience. But what is relevant experience for Calvert County? What's the best way to answer that question for Calvert County? Is there any minimum qualifications for the other members? It's not required by state law, but we could certainly include it in the next draft of the document. Is it appropriate for a person to serve on the Accountability Board up to 5 years before being eligible for reappointment? Is that too long? Should the terms be staggered? If they're staggered, how do you start them out? Who gets less than a full term? For the Accountability Board, should background checks be a reason for excluding applicants to the Accountability Board? And that question has actually sparked a lot of discussion in the email comments that have come in through the county's website. So if you go to calvertcountymd.gov / I guess from your direction would look like this, PAB for Police Accountability Board, you'll see a link to the survey. Next question, 6, is it appropriate for a person to serve on the Administrative Charging Committee for up to 5 years? And should those terms be staggered? Question 7, is there minimum qualifications for the Administrative Charging Committee? What should they be, if there are? And question 8, should background checks be grounds for excluding applicants from the Administrative Charging Committee? Question number 9 is sincere, though it seems a little tongue-in-cheek. What else should we consider in making the next draft? So we have a microphone. The floor is the audience. We do have some folks.
Before you do that, I have to acknowledge we have Commissioner Steve Weems and Commissioner Chris Gadway with us. I don't know if any others snuck in or not, but okay. I had to do that or I'll get fired.
Thank you. So, technology services, how would the folks on Zoom raise their hand?
I see it on the screen. When the, I don't remember what the star number is.
Okay. We'll research that. So if anybody on Zoom doesn't know how to raise your hand, we will give you instructions. In the audience, if there's anybody who'd like to come to the microphone, please feel free to do so. Star 69 to raise your hand in Zoom.
Okay, I'll get things started. My name is Edsel Brown. I've been a proud resident of Calvert for about 18 years. I just have a couple of questions to get things going and taking a look at the information that you provided. The first question would be, I note that you have I'll call it a pilot that you have, and we're commenting on that. You know, you're taking feedback, et cetera. What led to the approach that you took, number one? I'm just wondering why you all didn't consider having an advisory group of citizens on the front end and still do what we're doing now. My other concerns are in terms of, you've brought this up already, in terms of how long individuals can serve on the board. Again, we're assuming everybody's going to do a good job and be competent, but again, if you get somebody on there that could be an issue, you know, they're going to be on there for an extended period of time. So I personally have concerns about that.
Okay. To answer your first question, Commissioner Hutchins saw this legislation coming out of Annapolis and was very much proactive in April-May timeframe in getting a draft together. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to stay with the board for longer to see it through, but that was the approach he took. It's not a done deal. It certainly hasn't been discussed amongst the other commissioners whether they support this draft or don't support this draft. They charged me with going out and getting the ground truth, what this board should look like, so that they do a good job of representing the citizens of Calvert County. In what is people's jobs, people's lives, this matters. This is something we can't afford to get wrong. So they said, sincerely, we need to get this right. And if you don't, I'm not sure what was after that. But I mean, that's a good question. Why not have an advisory group? I think there will be refinements that are going to be necessary even in the next draft of the document, and that's certainly advice we'll take forward to the commissioners. How long should people serve? Is there do you have a recommendation?
I'll be honest, I don't have a recommendation. I didn't spend as much time.
I'm sorry, they do need to at the microphone.
Yeah, I'm going to plead the fifth on this one. I didn't get a chance to spend as much time as I would have liked to on this, because one of the things I would like to have done was see what some other jurisdictions are doing, and also the pros and cons in those other jurisdictions and how they came to the number that they use. So like you're saying, it's open here, you know, what's better, you know, a lower number or higher number, but I'd like to get some more feedback on what's been done to this point in time, since we're just starting.
My name's Tricia Pal, and I'm a resident of Lusby. And my question is, at this juncture, can we go ahead and assume that the term limits will be looked at a little bit more closely? Because the way that it is now, you're looking at 12 years. That's packing the board. That's almost permanent.
Yeah, that's the chair that was to have had experience in law enforcement, upper management level, serving for 12 years in the current draft, and certainly we appreciate that feedback.
My name is Teresa Kuhns. I have some direct comments and edits of the ordinance as written. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that on my handoff, because you know I come with notes usually. So I'm here as a Calvert County citizen in the most blessed to be given in this lifetime. I have 3 boys, all who attend Calvert County Public Schools. Both my 6th and 4th graders have special needs, which limit their communication and comprehension. In my older boy, you can likely see his difference given his physical attributes, while my 9-year-old looks no different than his typical peers. I know I turned it off. So let me explain why that matters. The disabled, and specifically the intellectual disability community, inclusive of mental illness, have a 16 times higher likelihood to be killed by law enforcement. Of the 5,000 fatal shootings in the last 6 years in our country, 25% have been in this population. And the proposed ordinance membership includes no single one representative, whether it be a legal guardian or parent like myself or an agency spokesperson. HB 670, which is coming from, it is a state mandate by the Maryland General Assembly. There is no other boards right now. We're all doing the same thing in every county. It says it should represent racial, gender, and cultural makeup of the jurisdiction. So here are the changes I would submit based off the new ordinance. Section 7.A2A, remove the requirement of a degree and instead make an equivalent of the field experience for our 3 retired law enforcement members. Section 7A2B, include language to list other types of minority associations inclusive of the Mid-Atlantic Women Association of Law Enforcement, therefore expanding the lens of diversity of which this ordinance was drafted. Section 7B, 3 minority populations are listed in the proposal, and according to our Calvert County last census information, each of these following 3 groups will receive 1 full representative each for the 9 board members in the ordinance. African American population sits at 13.3, Latin American at 4%, and the Asian population sits under 2% in Calvert County. The disabled population in the 18 to 65 only community sits at 7% of our total population, and it does not include the 65 plus disabled population or the under 18 population, which is about 11% of our total school population when you're considered special education eligible. Add racial breakdowns and the disabled community percentage only continues to increase. Given these statistics and data I shared, I implore our group here to be radically inclusive of a representative in the disabled population and continue the groundbreaking work Sheriff Evans and his team have already done within this community through our ARC and other organizations. Finally, I would again ask this group to expand the lens and remember the women of this county as we remain underrepresented across all the boards. Half of the Calvert County population are women according to the census, and there is no formula listed to represent this key demographic, although it is specific in the language of this bill. I have 6 years before my oldest son will be 18 in this community, and that's not enough time in government. I know that. I've worked on the side of this. There's very little to prepare this county for kids like him. So I'm really asking for your support in getting a disabled community representative on this board.
Thank you. Let's see, we do have a hand raised on Zoom.
Yes. KMSONDDSA, you are now unmuted. You are ready to proceed your comments.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Great. My name is Kate. I'm a resident of Dunkirk, but I'm speaking today on behalf of the organizing committee of Southern Maryland Democratic Socialists of America. So I'd like to note that Calvert County is, and all of Southern Maryland, is the traditional home of the Piscataway people who still live here. And that's always important to remember, especially the day after Indigenous Peoples Day, but it's also really important to remember right now when we talk about policing because our country is very young. It's built on stealing land, frankly, and our system of policing is built within that system. So it's very young. It hasn't been around that long in terms of human history. So the proposal as written, we feel, effectively ensures that the board will be as pro-police as possible with still having the appearance of impartiality. Not only is this really contrary to the purpose of a police accountability board, but it's denying ordinary residents of Calvert County the opportunity to have their opinions heard. A diversity of perspectives on this board is critical because when police cause harm, it disproportionately affects the most vulnerable in society, and this proposal seems designed to keep those very people out. So we ask that the following changes be made. First, there should be no requirement that a certain number of board positions be held by former law enforcement. Filling the board with law enforcement or retired law enforcement is functionally the same as filling it with current law enforcement because retired law enforcement have had the same biased training, and basically you're filling it with the perspective of the past. The reason this board is needed in the first place is because police can't be trusted to police the police. And if everyone in the board is supposed to receive training about legal procedure, there's really no reason why a retired law enforcement officer is the only person who has relevant experience. Second, we ask that there should be no requirement for a member of clergy to be on the board. There should be no requirement for education for board members. Higher education does not necessarily indicate a person's morality. Prior convictions should not automatically be disqualifying for participation. People who have been convicted of crimes have the most insight on the problems in the system, and a conviction decades ago doesn't say very much about a person's character today, frankly. Fifth, we believe that the board needs more clearly defined subpoena and other legal powers. We don't really feel like the board can accomplish anything if it's not legally empowered to do so. It's very important that it actually has the power of accountability and to make meaningful change in this county. Six, we also believe that the board needs to have more clearly defined conflict of interest laws. Related to that, we believe current and former board members and executives of companies that contract with the Calvert County Sheriff's Office should be prohibited from serving on this board, as we believe it's a significant conflict of interest. And additionally, we'd like to point out that, and this was mentioned by the previous speaker, the demographic requirements are not really inclusive of everyone. In particular, there's no mention of the Indigenous community in the demographic requirements. Thank you for your time. We'll also be submitting these electronically.
Thank you, Kate. Look forward to receiving this. Anyone else in the room, please, just come on up to the microphone.
Ed Baylor, Owings, Maryland. I have two quick questions.
I'll do my best.
The first one goes along the program states that it will affect local and state police. How would it react to the federal agencies that do policing in the county, such as marshals, U.S. Capitol, Secret Service, that deal and work close hand in hand with our agencies we have here?
And of course, under the Supremacy Clause, I doubt it will be able to reach DEA, FBI, all of NCIS, any of those groups, except insofar as it's a joint operation or it's and then it would only still affect the state and the county law enforcement agencies that are operating within Calvert County, DNR, state police, et cetera.
My second question deals with the sensitivity of the stuff they're going to be dealing with, and what have we considered to do if there are disagreements among the group and there's a vote and the people don't like on the committee the vote and they go public with their minority opinion, so to speak. And so what penalty is there? What penalty are you going to put in that so that the confidentiality of this report is sensitive and kept secret until such time as the chairman, et cetera, releases it?
That's a very good question, and not one I frankly had thought of, because the accountability board's role is going to be to accept the charging documents that there was an officer involved misconduct, and they'll pass that on to the charging committee. Now, the charging committee will be trained by the Maryland State Police Commission, or intended to be trained by the State Police Commission, in how to conduct themselves, both throughout the investigation, using their subpoena powers to get the body cam footage, to get whatever else they want or feel they need to make a decision. And the accountability board role is to look at the outcomes of that and determine whether or not they can read the tea leaves and see if there's a problem brewing that they can address and make a recommendation. Frankly, it's a little odd that they've set this up this way for commissioner counties that don't have a police force, because there really is no direct control over the sheriff's office by the county commissioners. But that's how it's set up.
I have two quick opinions.
Yes.
One, young lady who was talking about people with needs is very well said and very well needed, and I appreciate you bringing that. And I guess that'll be it. I took enough time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
There are two colleagues.
Hello, my name is Claire Hill, and touching on one question that Kate brought up, I do have to ask, since currently when I reviewed the qualifications for each person to run for office, particularly the sheriff's position, they do not currently need to have a background check. For example, I could run for sheriff without a background check. How are you going to implement that everyone who's running for political office, who's going to be part of that advisory board, if you overstep, say, what Kate had recommended, that we don't need or we do have to have background checks, how will we ensure that each of the county commissioners now have background checks who don't have a felony or don't have domestic violence behind them sitting on these committees? So I just wanted to reiterate and be stronger on the fallacies and the problems that I see that could be drastic if we ask for not having a background check or having a background check. And that seems to be a really cautious.
Glad that worked, because we were trying to spur some discussion. Should we have background checks?
But the first thing, if you're going to have a background, you're going to ask for a background check from an advisory committee.
Mm-hmm.
Why can I run for sheriff and not need a background check? Why can I be on the board of county commissioners or board of education over our children and not have a background check? So no one with a felony should be running for these positions, but if we're going to ask for people to take the time and volunteer to do such a thing and pay the money for a background check, because I know that they are expensive, who's going to make sure that this is not like age discrimination?
So is it a fair summary of your comments? And I mean this generally. Is it a fair summary to say no background checks for the accountability board or the charging committee or the trial board appointments, unless we're also going to implement it for across the board?
Correct.
Okay.
That's the only way I can see where we're not discriminating.
Honestly, that was a bait question because we were getting so little feedback initially. We put the survey together to come up with questions that would spur this kind of discussion, so thank you.
Is there a group that's going to be meeting about talking more about what we need in this, without being on the advisory committee you're talking about? Is there a group besides just a town hall meeting that's meeting to talk about what really needs to be? Because, for example, Teresa Coons and Kate are bringing up excellent points, and this gentleman, excellent points that I think we haven't been heard, or we feel like we have not been heard.
Yes. The short answer is no. There have not been any committee meetings talking about how we're going to make changes to this. I'm really the conduit. So please, I left my business card on the back, my cell phone number's on there, my email's on there. I'm happy to come meet with anyone, any group, anytime. Please. And
just to refer, this is a citizen advisory board or a citizen board for the judgment of police officers or deputy sheriffs that work in Calvert County. Every deputy sheriff that works in Calvert County goes through a thorough background check. If you're going to pass judgment on a deputy sheriff that works in Calvert County, you should also be free of committing any crimes and a free background check that you have not committed any crimes. And if you're on the board and commit any crimes that we can be terminated for, you should be terminated off the board also. That's the support that I'm giving. If you don't understand, I mean, you cannot be on there without a background check. If you're going to pass judgment on someone with it and have a negative background, then you shouldn't be on the board.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Katina Mako. I'm short, so I don't know if I have to lower this. For the gentleman before me, I beg to differ because a background check does not serve the mean all for everything. I believe that the posture in this county, as far as the black community in this county, is that of copland. Calvert County blacks make up 10%, yet 30% of the arrest. That's a problem. And if your PAB does not look like people like me, that's a bigger problem. Unfortunately, in this county, the posture that when police arrive, and I've seen some body cams from an incident that happened within my family from May 14th of this year, was very different. The posture of the police that arrived at that scene was different in regards to the person we were calling the police on. I'm not going to call any names, okay? But that's one thing. When you look at the body cam videos, I think the CCSO and the PAB, you might want to look at those body cam videos to determine how you need to go about this PAB, because the interaction within the black community, as we all know, is always one-sided. So that's one thing. Another thing that this county may benefit from is having a citizen complaint oversight panel that's composed of the citizens in this county, where people can file complaints regarding the conduct of police officers that are independent of police officers. Police cannot police themselves, and if you think that you can, you're greatly mistaken. You're greatly mistaken. You're greatly mistaken. So that needs to happen. And so if you're going to form this PAB, you need to have a panel of people that are consistent of diverse people. Everyone cannot look the same and have a fair and treatment in regards to the legal justice system in this county. Another thing, to represent the different minorities as a whole, you should also reach out to those groups. There should be an overflow of blacks right now in this town hall. The fact that it's secretly held is a problem in this county. Our family went through issues that are civil right now because of these secret little meetings that happen. And I'm going to also say, it's not a good look to ride into this county and see a sign in which a woman who is of a minority like me being called a hoe. So if you want the world to look at you in a different light, you need to change what you've been doing, the status quo. The simple fact that the CCBOC is consisted of retired police officers, and now you're going to put the PAB with retired police officers, is another sign that there's something wrong. I will say this again, Calvert County is a perfect place for a quiet storm, okay? Do not think that because you're nestled in this county away from Washington, D.C., Prince George's County, or other places, Charles County, St. Mary's, that you don't have the problems. You have major drug problems down here, okay? You also have major issues within your police department, which is why the ACLU is investigating it. So with that being said, the PAB needs to look like people like myself. The posture needs to change in this county. As far as coming into this county for someone to see derogatory Jim Crow signs in this county, that tells me a lot of what's going on in this county. So that's my 2 cents, and I might get up on this mic again.
Yes, sir, and then we have a couple folks who've had their hands up on Zoom, so after you, we'll do that.
Yeah, I'm Ari Johnson from Sunderland. You do need a background check for everybody on the board. And the big problem is the county. I've been looking in the paper and other incidents. There's too much partiality. There has to be impartiality, So I had a case where I was at the library and I got a call from a detective, and he was asking a question about this and so forth and that. And so I leave, and I'm going up Route 4 by the Wason's Corner, and this truck comes from out of nowhere with Texas tags, and I got 9812, and so forth. So I wrote it down and had it, somebody checked nothing. So I called back, talked to the person, and he said, "What?" So it's like trying to intimidation, which I don't, I'm not going to be intimidated, so forth. But it's too much, problems on the paper and stuff, and occurring here. But it's too much like intimidation. And I know the police do use stingrays. They use the what you call the radio towers, triangulate, and they can track you and so forth. Know who you are and so forth. But the problem is too much partiality, and they have to be background checks. They can't be partial. Got to be impartial.
Okay. Thank you, sir. On Zoom, your choice.
Kip Atlee, we are now ready to receive some comments. Please push *6 to unmute yourself.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank you for this town hall meeting and for the draft that you're now have under consideration. I think it's a good start. As the comments tonight suggest, there are obviously areas that perhaps could be improved. For context, I'd just like to note that I've been an attorney for over 40 years in prosecution, defense, and advising law enforcement agencies, in the military for 45 years, and a resident of the county for 25 years. I'd like to address some of the areas within the draft that I think need further attention. First, I'd suggest that the members of the Accountability Board be required to receive training similar to that of the ACC, and particularly if they have not been recently trained in law enforcement. Experience is excellent, but police training has changed considerably year by year, and so I think that requirement should be across both organizations. I think it needs to be made clear that positions which do not require law enforcement experience not be former law enforcement individuals. The way it's phrased now, you could have a constituted body that is largely law enforcement personnel, either in past or present duties. I would suggest there be a preference in some degree for members of both boards whose experience is not from Calvert County. I think a breadth of experience is helpful, and it can avoid perceptions such as some of those that have already been expressed in this meeting. I think it needs to provide for an office not involved with law enforcement to be available to assist individuals who wish to file complaints. The process can be daunting, particularly for people who have no experience with law enforcement, or for people whose experience or education, language skills may be limited. I don't believe that the ACC should be limited to recording failures in supervision to situations only where it caused or contributed to officer misconduct. Having been part of many inquiries and investigations, it is highly likely that you will have situations which do not substantiate misconduct, but the investigation itself discloses areas where supervision was nonetheless less than optimal. I think it should also empower the board to address, or the ACC to address, areas where there were shortcomings in guidance and training as well as supervision. I think it needs to include guidance regarding precedents when there are situations under consideration may be potentially appropriate for criminal charges. It needs to clarify whether the criminal process takes precedence before administrative review, and ideally to set up some process, since criminal proceedings can take a considerable amount of time, where the administrative review and the criminal review can proceed in parallel, so the administrative lessons are not lost or deferred for years, and coordination, for instance, with the state's attorney's office might assist in ensuring that criminal proceedings are not prejudiced by that. There's an area in section 6A under meetings and reporting, which can be understood to mean that the heads of law enforcement, whether they're members of the PAB or not, are involved in the appointment of civilian members of the charging committees and trial boards. This should be clarified to make clear that that is not the case. I have other comments that I'll submit in writing. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, sir. We have one more Zoom caller.
Next speaker we have is Dwayne Rager. Please press *6 to unmute your phone.
Great, thank you so much, Mr. Norris, President Hance, and members of the Board of County Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you all this evening. I'm here on behalf of the Calvert County Democratic Central Committee, and we sincerely appreciate your engaging the community on this very deeply important issue. For the record, as she said, my name is Dwayne Rager. I'm the chair of the Calvert County Democratic Central Committee. And as you've heard, and as you know, a number of community members have expressed very serious concerns regarding the proposed draft being shared, and we share those concerns. Now, the Calvert County Democratic Central Committee holds deep respect for our law enforcement officers. They put their lives on the line to protect all of us, and for that reason, they're equipped with certain tools meant to save innocent lives. Unfortunately, as with any profession, tools of the trade can be misused and abused. The Declaration of Independence so famously lists those unalienable rights endowed to us, each by our Creator, and the first of those is life. When those aforementioned tools have the inherent ability to strip someone of their sacred right to life, the scrutiny and consequences of abusing such a tool must be equitable. Additionally, our founding fathers laid out 10 amendments to the Constitution that we collectively know as the Bill of Rights. The fifth of these rights includes the right to due process. So while the scrutiny of stripping someone of their unalienable right to life must be just as severe, we must ensure the protection of one's right to due process. Now, the Police Accountability Act of 2021, passed by the Maryland General Assembly earlier this year, does strive to do just that. Now, as we all know, the law creates 3 separate boards with certain guidelines and requirements on how they should be composed. And in order to comply with that legislation, you all released the current draft proposal. It's our understanding that the intent of the legislation was to create community oversight of local and state law enforcement agencies. And unfortunately, the current draft fails to meet that intent. The oversight boards and committees are undoubtedly charged with very serious responsibilities, and the consequences of their decisions can be deeply impactful, affecting an individual's career and a family's livelihood. So too can the decisions levied by other boards and commissions whose members the Board of Commissioners appoint. For example, a decision by the Planning Commission could affect the value of someone's property and their family's financial well-being for generations. To that end, the membership requirements and operational guidelines for these newly created law enforcement oversight committees and boards should, in fact, reflect pre-existing similar boards and commissions already established right here in Calvert County. That should include whether members should undergo background checks. We've heard a lot about that tonight. Just as it may be helpful to have a member of the committee or a board with law enforcement experience, it is just as important to have a member of the committee with direct experience on those very actions that have led to the complaints that that committee will investigate. It should also be reflective of the number of members, the length of term limit, compensation for members, and how the chair would be elected or selected. Additionally, as the state law dictates, and as you've heard, these boards and committees should in fact be reflective of racial, gender, and cultural diversity here in Calvert County. The proposed draft also precisely defines professional background and experience for a number of members with an emphasis on law enforcement. While we appreciate the intent, we encourage you to instead loosen those requirements. This would help ensure the diversity needed while allowing professionals from various fields to consult members as requested. Finally, these boards and committees as drafted do not reflect the intent of the law to provide for community-driven oversight. We encourage you to ensure robust community participation by appointing the majority of members from our own towns and neighborhoods, not just those with a law enforcement background. In conclusion, the Calvert County Democratic Central Committee urges the Calvert County Board of Commissioners to drastically revise the proposed draft to better ensure citizen oversight, good governance, and true transparency. We look forward to working with each of you on this important issue as we strive to make our community safer for all of its citizens. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I saw in the room there were a couple more folks who wanted to provide comment, please. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Bill Goodwin from Prince Frederick. I've been here since '72. I think that's longer than many of you have been alive. I'm feeling a little old tonight. At the outset, you talked about how the language of the state law referring to police departments could make it a problem of supervising sheriff's department and deputies. Did I understand that correctly?
There's no direct supervision of the sheriff's office by the Board of County Commissioners.
And what about this board and committee?
The board and committee is going to have an obligation to report back to the Board of County Commissioners and the sheriff on what their findings are, where there are issues with oversight, and how to improve the outcomes so that there are fewer complaints against law enforcement officers. But there's no stick, if you will.
What's the chance of the board supporting change in legislation at the next session to remove that obstacle?
I can say that they started in Annapolis looking at this with Senate hearings in the summer of 2020. There were probably 15 hearings in July and August before they ever got into session in January of 2021. And what I believe passed with respect to the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights and what's available through the Public Information Act now was a result of probably some negotiations up in Annapolis that may have been going on long before that. So I think it's probably glacial speed that we can expect further changes.
Well, one other thought occurs to me then, and that's to ask the current sheriff and candidates for sheriff to commit through maybe a memorandum of understanding to abide by the work of the charging committee and board.
Well, they will have to follow the charging committee's disciplinary recommendation. That is required by state law. But the accountability board's reporting out and recommendations on how to make it better so that we don't have as many complaints is their opinions, and certainly there could be an understanding that's reached with the sheriff on that.
All right, and the last thing is the makeup of the charging committee. It doesn't seem to state that there has to be some representative diversity on that group.
So with the charging committee draft that we have today, I believe that we do have some requirements that I have to go back and look, but the charging committee is appointed by the Board of County Commissioners, have 2 members, and the Police Accountability Board have 2 civilian members, both of them civilian members. And then the chair of the Police Accountability Board comes over and serves as the chair of the charging committee. If we didn't have some requirement for experience on the charging committee, I believe that was what was intended by Commissioner Hutchins, but it's all open for discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Evening.
My name is Michael Kent. I'm the president of the Calvert County NAACP. So I wanted to narrow down on some specifics as to what types of complaints might be coming in, because I've been getting them. The NAACP has been getting them for years. People that have been afraid to make a complaint to the sheriff or to the state police have been coming to us. But as far as the makeup of the board, let me start with that. Our position is that the makeup of the board shouldn't be any more complicated than to be on a jury. If you're eligible to sit on a jury, you're 18 or older, you're a Calvert County resident, you should be qualified to sit on accountability board or charging board. There isn't any more complicated case than a medical malpractice case, and yet they don't require a doctor to sit on that to make judgment. They bring in expert witnesses. So civilians can handle police matters just by having experts come in and testify. They don't need to be sitting in judgment. But as far as the cases we get, they're not that complicated either. It's a lot of right and wrong. It's not a matter of George Floyd and putting a knee on someone's neck or whatever. It's traffic stops and a car full of black males having to put their face in the dirt during a traffic stop. Or extended traffic stops. Anytime someone is pulled over, the black male or Hispanic male in the car, even if they're not the driver, they're asked for their identification. And then they run that ID. If there's any kind of record, then the traffic stop is extended, and drug dogs are brought in. So we've had elderly people complain that they were standing outside in the rain for an hour or so waiting for the drug dogs to come because they had their grandson in the car. The more egregious things that we've had happen are roadside searches and body cavity searches. Not one, two, but multiple people complaining because, there are no street lights out there, that they're just taken out in the dark and told, drop your pants and squat. We want to see what comes out. And that's on, as I said, multiple occasions. There are also complaints about what happens during search warrants. We're talking about women, having some women on the board. Searches are usually done early in the morning, getting people out of bed. Usually there are women undressed, and I've been getting complaints from them about the conduct of the police officers. They're not allowed to cover themselves. They're handcuffed, nude. And the explanation is always, we don't have that many female officers to go on these raids. Had complaints about how children were treated, that they had to stand outside in the cold while a search warrant was going on, without a coat on. They weren't allowed to come back into the house. Yeah. Yes. So hopefully this is better.
Yes.
Okay. It's complaints like that. We're talking about the mentally handicapped or disabled, learning disabled. We've had complaints of people that orders are shouted to the police officer or by the police officer that just they don't understand what they're doing, so they don't comply. And then after the case is over with, it's just a comment that's made by the police officer, an insensitive comment. Well, I can understand now because he's a dummy. He wouldn't get it. It's things like that that we get complaints on that are not technical things, but just right and wrong. And that's what I just wanted to point out. Thank you.
Gentlemen, yes, sir.
My name is James Thiel. As citizens of a freedom-loving democracy, a democratic society, we believe that a police accountability board is long overdue. However, in order for a board to ever hope of providing the necessary checks and balances of power, there must be obviously no requirement or priority for police or military experience. In fact, it should be required that no member have any history or ties to police, policing, or police unions whatsoever, as would create a clear conflict of interest compromising the integrity of such a board's proceedings. A minimum of transparency must be guaranteed. If not board members be openly and freely elected by citizens of the county, it must at least be fully disclosed how and why members have or haven't been selected. Establish clear steps and sought after skills and or experience, and solicit public insight and commentary regarding selections. We must have an outline of how subpoena powers will be practiced, and we must be guaranteed absolute transparency in the investigation process and their results. We must also prohibit prior convictions from being used to eliminate candidates of the board. Thank you, sir. not only do the incarcerated and historically criminalized make up a significant portion of our subject population, they have the requisite experience with the system and critical vantage point which so many of us lack. Their voice above all should be prioritized to ensure both the equality and diversity necessary to effectively hold police accountable. The board must be representative of community and not government, police, or military. We should not be expected to trust police entirely with our well-being, our lives, or our sacred liberty. Carrying weapons and dealing in violence in a professional and/or administrative capacity removes such individuals from the context of vulnerability to which we, the people, are exposed on a regular basis. The whole point of having an accountability board is to restore oversight to the people so that we may protect ourselves from the violence normalized by police and military-style training and practice. That which treats anyone as suspect and suspects like a potential threat or an enemy. Lastly, the board budget needs to reflect the extreme importance of the task. We are talking about life and limb, liberty and the loss thereof, mental health, and our very own human dignity. There is a lot at stake here and much work to be done. $500 per meeting is not only absurd, it's disrespectful to the citizens and all who visit Calvert County. Also, I'd like to suggest that board complaint forms should be distributed after every official encounter with police personnel. That way it would be easy for anyone to apply if they have a comment. And they're even made aware that they can, that there is a board and that they can file a complaint. Thank you very much for your time and the opportunity to speak.
There are 5 callers on Zoom.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak before we go to Zoom? Okay. First caller on Zoom.
Lisa McCall, you are now ready to receive your comments. Please push *6 to unmute your phone.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. I'll first start by saying I am a African American woman. As you can see, I am a lifer. Been in Calvert all my life. I've been a member of the federal government for 32 years. I consider myself a law-abiding citizen. And in the last 5 to 6 years, I've been followed for no reason that I could determine by the police just because I was driving a specific type of vehicle. And followed for more than 5 minutes, and that following did not result in any stopping or arrest. So something is broken here in this county, and it definitely needs to be fixed. As far as the board and the term that people should be appointed to the board, I would recommend 2 to 3 years. I don't think you should stack a board and have people assigned from 5 to 10 year period. I agree with the gentleman who said that the board should reflect the people and represent the people. I do not agree that the board should have members of the current police department. It is hard for you to be impartial and be unbiased when you are looking at cases for your fellow peers. And there's no reason why members of the community cannot render a decision on a matter. I don't believe that education should be a requirement. There are many people who are very intelligent who sit on various boards across this country, whether they have a higher level degree or not. So I don't think that should be a requirement. I would ask that the board or the commissioners consider that the board represent all generations, from the baby boomers to the Z's and the Xers. I think that's very important. I think now, as the document is written, it's too top down. It's the commissioners telling us what to do. This should be a board of the community, and as such, the community should have the say-so and the right to govern the board. And so I think that change should be made. As far as board, appointing people to the board, sounds like somebody or people will be making decisions to appoint people to the board. And I think, again, that's too top down. I think more consideration should be to people either volunteering or you nominate people, and then these people receive their final nomination and approval through a voting process of some type. My last point I will make, I think we need to make sure that members of this board have no direct, they're not related nor affiliated with people who are on this board, so that conflict or ethical conduct, we need to make certain that that's in place. And then training, I think, is important. I think we're talking about the board, but I think Calvert County also needs to address some retraining of their police department. And thank you for allowing me to comment. That concludes my comments for today.
Thank you very much. Another speaker on Zoom.
Next speaker is Malcolm Bunn. You have now been asked to unmute yourself. Please push *6 to unmute your phone.
Good afternoon. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for having this public town hall meeting to discuss this very important issue. I have to agree with a number of the previous speakers, and I don't want to repeat, but I do want to emphasize that Mr. Kent made very good points, as well as Mr. Rager. And one of the things I think we need to be aware of, this is to be a citizens committee, accountability board. And looking at the former commissioner's proposal, it seems to be very top-heavy in one way of looking like it's taking authority and oversight out of the hands of civilians and putting it back in the hands or keeping it in the hands of the police board. I do want to address one specific item that's in this proposal, and it's looking at the chair of the Accountability Charging Committee. I believe it states that the chair of the police accountability board should also be the chair of the charging board of the charging committee. And if you look at section 3-104, let's see, paren A 2, paren I, it says the chair of the county's police accountability board or another member of the accountability board designated by the chair of the accountability board would be a member, should be composed or would be a member of the county administrative charging committee. It does not say that the chair of the police accountability board is also the chair of the administrative charging committee. It just says that they would be a member of the charging committee and that they would not necessarily be the board. And since the statute does not designate who would be the chair of that board, then that board in and of itself should designate its chair. And I think we should follow the law as much as possible, not only in that aspect, but also the intent of the law. And in reading the committee reports and everything, the intent appears to be that this is to be a citizens heavy board. And I thank you for the time. And again, I thank you for having this particular public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. For anyone who's following along, that's page 33 of Chapter 59 of the Laws of Maryland. That's available on the county website, calvertcountymd.gov/PAB. It's one of the resources that we've made available to the public in advance of the meeting. Next caller on Zoom.
Next caller on Zoom will be Mary's iPad. You have now been asked to unmute yourself. Please press *6 to unmute your phone.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mary. You're welcome to provide your comments.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for having this meeting this evening and for allowing me to speak. I did submit some comments online, but I wanted to emphasize one thing. I totally agree with so many of the speakers tonight, and I think the fact that there have been many who've spoken to the fact that the way this is written, that it is very police forward, and it is not a citizens board. However, being realistic, knowing that it's very possible that there will be law enforcement participation on the board, I would like to suggest that not just a retired law enforcement, but they must have a period, a break from their leaving law enforcement to being appointed, if that is going to be the bottom line on who's on the committees. That break should be anywhere from 3 to 5 years. The intent was not to have an active law enforcement person on the board. And I think that if someone leaves office and they're appointed the next day, that this definitely violates the perception and is a conflict of interest. And I agree with, like I said, so many of the speakers. I think transparency is the ultimate need, and I would hope that that would be considered. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next Zoom speaker.
Next Zoom speaker will be Pre-K American Day School. Your phone has now been asked to mute. Please push *6 to unmute your phone.
Hi, my name is Summer. I am a resident of Owings, Calvert County, Maryland. I just wanted to address a comment that I believe was from the president of the NAACP. As far as saying that complaints are not George Floyd related or about a knee being on someone's neck, I mean, I am a little discouraged to hear that because there have been Black men to die in the custody of the Calvert County Sheriff's Office. And I do think everyone needs to be alerted that the people on this accountability board need to be on this accountability board knowing such. This is not just a board to handle traffic things or anything like that. This is absolutely and could be life or death. We do have Calvert County families who are still seeking justice. So with that being said, I would just appreciate if everyone would be mindful of the true weight that this accountability board can hold with our citizens.
And I'm not able to speak for Mr. Kent, but I believe his point was not that there are not problems to overcome and there haven't been deaths, but there are the great multitude of complaints that he sees are related to certain types of incidents related to traffic stops and other things as he enumerated. So, but thank you very much, Summer, for your comments. Next Zoom caller.
Next Zoom caller will be EW iPad. You have now been asked to unmute yourself. Please push *6 to unmute your phone.
Isn't technology great?
Caller BW iPad.
Yeah, I think I'm here. I'm having
Yes.
a little trouble unmuting.
You're here.
Yeah, okay. I'm ready for my comments. My name's Bucky Wells, and most of the comments I've heard so far I totally disagree with. I don't think we need a police accountability board in Calvert County. They may be needed elsewhere, but not in Calvert County. I've seen a lot of people pulled over and out of the car being searched for drugs. I've never seen anybody with their face in the dirt or their pants down that didn't want their pants down. And if we do have an accountability board, I don't think it should be staffed by a bunch of amateurs. How would any of you like an accountability board watching what you do full of amateurs? Would you like that? Probably you would not. If there's going to be an accountability board, why don't we have one for the commissioners, the planning board, the Maryland State Legislature, and anybody else? I mean, a police officer's job, He could get killed any day he goes to work. If you watch the news at all, you'll see that every other day a police officer is killed on duty. There's not a citizen killed every day by a policeman. So I don't see where all this anti-police rhetoric is coming from. I'm 71 years old, and I haven't had a bit of trouble not getting arrested. But if I was arrested, I would cooperate. It's people who don't cooperate that have a problem. So if you don't commit a crime, you're not going to have a problem. And if you do commit one, cooperate with the officers, and you won't have a problem. Just go to court and state your case. That's my opinion, like it or not. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have one more caller on Zoom.
Yes. Susan's iPad. We are now ready for you. Please push *6 to unmute your phone.
Hello there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. My name is Susan Rourke, and I am here as a private citizen, but also the former director of the Community Mediation Center here in Calvert County. The current director was not available tonight. I think it's important that everyone know that we, the Community Mediation Center of Calvert County, an MOU that has been active for 6 or 7 years, maybe longer, with the Sheriff's Department to mediate citizens' complaints. And we have found that to be extremely successful. I've done many of them personally. It's a current program. It kind of wanes sometimes, and then it comes back. I am not suggesting that this be a substitute, because I certainly support a community advisory committee. But I think it's important that everyone know that this MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, has been in place. In fact, folks, we were the first how do I say this? The first Sheriff's Department in the state of Maryland to set up a citizens complaint review board. It took an inordinate amount of work. We had to get agreement from the union, etc. And it still exists today. So as this advisory committee moves forward, there may be levels of complaints that can be referred to mediation. And just want to go on record, Sherry Tardio, the current director, has also commented on this, that is also a resource that's available to all citizens through the Calvert County Sheriff's Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, ma'am. You said you'd be back.
Yeah, I sure would. I want to respond to Bucky and also to address just something in regards to personally.
You can address those comments
Okay.
to me. We don't need to start.
In regards to police responding to incidents, he made the comment about people in the dirt. It's not about people being pulled over just by police on the road. It's also about women who are harassed, who have peace orders, in which the police respond and they don't carry out those peace orders. You know, women had that high percentage of being killed because of sometimes the lack of response from the courts and also the peace orders being carried out. And so we've had a family member who, until this day, right today, is still being harassed in her own home along her road. And when she made calls to the police, on 2 occasions she was told that they were not going to come. But when the gentleman that was harassing her called, they came. The last incident happened on June 4th of this year, 2021, to the point that we had to call the state police. So I beg to differ for what he said, and just, again, going back to the climate of why the PAB needs to look like people like me in the community, because people, we're impacted. Yes, we're not saying that we don't want the police or we're against the police, but we're against the tactics of police that are not protecting and serving and carrying out the law. And so in that instance where the police, she was told that the police weren't going to come, but came for him. That shows the disparity in how minorities are treated when we call, and why this is important that that PAB is reflective of the community it serves. Another issue also was the locking of the gate, where this gentleman locked the gate. The peace order stated that he was not to lock the gate. CCSO would not do their job in arresting this man, so the state police had to do it. Again, the PAB cannot be composed of police who will not carry out their job. It's not going to work. The police cannot police themselves. So I just want to add that 2 cents, and I might be back again.
Mr. Norris, I'm Leonard Zuz. I live in Solomons.
I've enjoyed reading your email comments. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I have 2 comments to make, and the first is to thank you for holding this public meeting. The reason I really appreciate this is that I understand your frustration where you felt that there wasn't much public response to the PAB in your efforts to gain information. I would just point out that in a meeting such as this, we hear each other, so we know we're not isolated. We know the message gets through to you, it gets through to Commissioner Hance, and it gets through to other people, and we don't have to sit back after we've sent an email in and wonder, does anybody really give a, we'll let it go at that. And at risk of belaboring a point, I'd like to address the question of the police, retired police and retired military that was proposed by Commissioner Hutchins. And I have 2 problems with that. Number 1 is an ancient principle of law. I'm not a lawyer, but I think you know this, and any other lawyer around knows that nemo judex in sua causa. No one can sit in judgment of his own case. So when you have police sitting on this board, they are going to see themselves as representing even though they're retired, they're going to see themselves as representing the police department and so forth. The second point I'd like to make in that regard goes to a much more subtle principle, and that's that as much courage as it may take to stand up in the face of an enemy, it takes a lot more courage to stand up in the face and oppose your friends. So that a retired policeman, a retired military officer, and God knows why somebody suggested a retired chaplain should be, military chaplain, should be on that board, I would say that that person would be under huge pressure if that individual, male or female, were to agree with the person lodging the complaint, but knew that that weekend he was going to be getting together with his or her buddies at some social event, and they would face a lot of pressure to not voice their opposition to that. So I would leave it at that and ask that you keep that in consideration as you continue to build these boards.
Thank you.
Mr. Norris, good
Yes,
evening.
sir.
County Commissioners, distinguished guests, and thank you for everybody getting up speaking this evening. I really appreciate everybody coming out. My name is Nick DeFelice. I am the president of the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge 109. In addition to being the current president of FOP 109, I'm a 15-year police officer here in Calvert County who's acted in capacities as a school resource officer, detective, academy instructor, now currently a trainer on our special operations team. I'm also a resident of this county, lifelong resident that came back to serve my community. A couple things that I just took notes of. I had no intention of speaking tonight, but I think everybody brought up very valid points, and I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to speak in front of everybody. Policing is a people's business, right? I'm gonna say that again. Policing is a people's business. We're here. Some of my coworkers are here. Some of the command staff is here because I want to hear your concerns. Nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop, and that sounds cliche, but I can say that for at least the people in the corner. Every single day since the 3 p.m. news cycle that you see, we can talk about the incidents over the last several years. I know there's a wealth of experience on this front row. That makes me sick to my stomach. And I take an investment in our community. Right now, law enforcement is in an identity crisis. For many years, in my 15 years of law enforcement, I've been asked to respond as a psychiatrist, a therapist,
a counselor, and a community mediator. I'm definitely not trained in that, all right? But what I am designed and what I have been trained to do is treat people fairly, with dignity, and with respect. From Ms. Mako, I'm sorry that you've been treated unfairly. I can't comment on those specific incidents because I was on that scene. But what I can tell you, the FOP has been working with the county commissioners, the sheriff's office, to make sure that we recruit and retain quality individuals, all right, by various means. We're losing so many good students. Let's see, Huntingtown High School shirt back here to other counties because they pay more. That's a totally different issue. But what we're here to discuss is being introspective, right? Calvert County is one of the few agencies regionally that has body cameras, okay? Body cameras and tasers have been provided for a number of years. If you look around regionally, Charles County or what have you, they're not provided to them right now, okay? I represent 175 members. 85% of those members live in Calvert County. 75% of those are from Calvert County. So we hear you. So we do understand that things are happening nationwide, and we do not want other incidents like that. A couple of things that we discussed as an FOP, right? So we have talked many times about emphasizing ethics in people's backgrounds and make sure there's transparency. That's one of the things that we're leaning towards, that backgrounds, to what degree, that's where the board needs to come. But know that these commission members might be privy to ongoing narcotics investigations, to your point, that may have contributed to the overdose of a loved one. So our concern would be for our officers' safety and also for the complainant's safety as well. We'd also support significant training. Like I said before, I've been involved in law enforcement for 15 years. I challenge myself to learn something every single day. I just got back from a training in Ohio that is totally revamping the way that I was trained, and maybe some of the gentlemen on the front row. Realistic de-escalation training. And that's what we've done through the Community Mediation Center, the Mobile Crisis Team, all right? I know this seems like Copland, but again, this is about the collaboration education through this, at least setting up this board, okay? I know Commissioner Hutchins, with respect to him, he wanted like the Harvard and Yale of doctorate degrees on this, but I think we'd be remiss if there's gentlemen in this room that are no longer associated with law enforcement that have a wealth of experience that could be used as a sounding board about the ebb and flow. Hey, was somebody trained like that? All right, would you have done that? Okay, and they can give from that previous experience. The legislation determined that you will work with local law enforcement and use a matrix. And I really encourage and I really hope that everybody in here decides to do that. I'm gonna leave you with this. Ideas create inspiration, and inspiration makes change. So as the FOP and the members of your community and our community, we would like to work with you, collaborate together to create the best board possible to review incidents so we don't become a national incident. Thank you very much, appreciate it.
We can share, Mike.
What I do hope is that everyone understands that we're all part of a solution and not part of the problem. And while we are sounding angry at, some of us may sound angry at the police department, it's like siblings. We hope that we're coming together. And I do want to say that because I feel like some of the guys in the back may be getting upset. It's not meant to hurt them. But one of the problems that I see is that the citizens have other advice that may not be heard or might not generally be said to the police department. For example, currently, as it stands, our Calvert County Sheriff's Department has an extremely low rate of being vaccinated for COVID, and they protect and serve. And if you compare the rate of the Sheriff's Department to the state troopers' barracks, it's significantly frightening. Who is watching out for the citizens? And that is one of the problems that I see that could help make the transparency and the discussion open to the citizens, to the Sheriff's Department. I'm not looking for fighting with anybody. I want to have an open discussion and to talk to those who live in my community with the Sheriff's Department, particularly those who live in my community, and say, well, what can we do to get more of you vaccinated? Because so many of you are not vaccinated and you're pulling over people. And if someone is health risk and you're pulling them over and I say, sorry, I'm not opening my window to you, I need a supervisor, I feel like I have that right. Who's hearing me? Who's going to talk to me if I can't talk to the sheriff about that? if I'm too frightened to talk to the sheriff himself, who else can I go to? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Naquita. I am a resident of Huntingtown. And I had a few comments. I've been listening. I've been waiting to say anything because I felt like there was a lot of great things being said, a lot of great recommendations being made. So I really just want to speak on the climate of Calvert County. If you look around this room, I may be one of the younger people here. That's an issue. We're talking about a county where, I'm sorry to say this, not all of you will be here all respect. Thank y'all for being here, paving the way. So that's my first issue. And I also wanted to comment on, the officer's statement. You don't want the county to be a national skeptical. If you Google Calvert County, we already people from outside of the county tell me when we're on the news. I have friends who would come from different places like Baltimore, New Jersey, etc., to come see me. And they're always afraid to come to Calvert County. They're afraid to come here because as soon as you get here, you're going to see at least 3 police cars. You're going to continue to see them as you go down the county. You see the derogatory signs. You see all of the other signage that I'm not going to get into because I'm partial tonight. And it makes people very uncomfortable and makes them feel unsafe. So now we're talking about police leaving the county to go to other counties to make more money. I have never been anywhere where I have seen more police than Calvert County. I have had white people, and I'm going to say that because this isn't just a black thing. I have had white people ask, why are there so many cops in Calvert County? Why are there so many police here? That's an issue. And we're talking about traffic stops a lot. Why are there so many traffic stops? I have never gotten pulled over anywhere but in Calvert County. Anywhere but in Calvert County. I am a law-abiding citizen. I follow the speed limit. That's my Route 4. Aware of what this county actually is. This county does not feel safe. As a young black person, my plan is to leave the county as soon as I have enough money to do so. I don't want to stay here. I have family who have land who are fighting to keep land because, again, county issues, right? But I don't want to put in that effort in a place where I don't feel safe. And as a police officer to come here and say that it's hard on them and that people are against them, the fact of the matter is we're not making this up. We're not feeding off of George Floyd, rest his soul. We're not doing that. This was an issue way before 2020. It was an issue before 1993 when I came in the game. And it is going to continue to be an issue if we don't take this seriously. And I understand, I want to respect everyone's feelings, but they are not my siblings. I do not look at them as family because they do not treat me as such. Thank you.
Thank you. Young man's been very patient up here. I'm anxiously awaiting.
Good evening. My name is Alfonso Hawkins, and I believe there was a gentleman who said he's been in the county since 1962. I've been here since 1952. I know about the tobacco, the cornfields, and all those things, the hogs, the horses. I know about all of that. Just a couple of things I would like to address regarding the board. There are 2 things it speaks about in terms of minorities, that it should be a minority that's associated with a Black Officers Association or NOBLE, the National Organization for Black Law Enforcement Executives. I do not agree with that because it limits the pool of applicants. I am a member of NOBLE. I am a member of the Police Black Officers Association in Prince George's County with the Maryland State Rangers and Maryland Natural Resources Police. But I don't feel that that should be a requirement. That should be done away with. That's point number 1. Point number 2, it talks about a prospective member should be a graduate of National FBI Academy and a few others. I don't agree with that because during my time, it was very political. Not everybody had an opportunity to go to those academies. So again, it's limiting the pool. So I respectfully suggest that you really look at that. take a very good look at that. Let me make a few comments. I'm done with that. I hope that we can reach an agreement in some way to make these boards come together. That will be the best for the citizens involved, okay, point blank. I've heard a lot of good comments tonight. I agree with most of them. Some I do not, and who's going to agree 100%? However, I would be remiss if I did not say that to some extent I feel that, and I know what the climate is like for law enforcement. I spent 39 years in law enforcement, and I'm able to stand here and speak to everybody, and I'm grateful for that, okay? But I can tell you that in the three agencies I retired from, I had oversight for internal affairs. We do have police officers with objectivity, okay? We do have police officers who can look at somebody else in blue and say, you're wrong and you're fired. I've done that for 39 years, and I will not hesitate. There are others who will do the same thing. So please, I ask you, do not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We do have great police officers across the country, just like we have great doctors, great lawyers, great nurses, great teachers. Then we have very bad people in those professions, including police officers. So what we try to do to the best of our ability, protect and serve. That's what we do, just like other professions. That's what they do. They serve, and to some extent, they protect. They save lives, okay? So, but I just want us to move forward with an open mind and know that there should not be a condemnation of the entire profession of law enforcement. That's a bad move because we need each other. We, the same people that put on that uniform, they are the citizens that's coming from the community. They just happen to have a badge and a gun, and they have an authority right now. If there are issues, I say to you, take it to the highest level. President Kent from the NAACP spoke. He said he receives a lot of complaints, a lot of issues from people, especially young people. Well, I submit to you and everybody within my hearing, I'm a citizen of the community, but since I'm well known in Calvert County, I'm from ground up since 1952, I too receive those same types of complaints. My wife often says to me, why don't you set up an office? I said, no, people need help. And we take those complaints to the people that we know we need to take them to, the proper authorities. I have always, I have not had any issues. And I don't know why, but I haven't. So I suggest that when you have those issues, and I'm familiar with some of the issues that have been raised tonight, very, very familiar, and involved with two of them, intimately involved. There is a way to do it. We need to take our time, and we just want to work together. We don't want to leave this juncture, this venue tonight like this, because we're not going to get anything accomplished. Give everybody a chance. Let's work together. We have to live in the same county, whether we like each other or not, no matter what our skin color is, our size. We need some peace and harmony. Thank you.
No, I appreciate your comments. I truly do, and we are one community. And there's no question that when we leave here tonight, we've got to consider what are the unintended consequences of our next steps and make the best decisions we can. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Sandra Raviv, and I live in North Beach. I have a couple of questions and a couple of comments. One is, how much feedback have you gotten in your collecting input in favor of the first draft that the county commissioners released of the PAB and ACC?
I don't know that we've gotten a single comment that didn't say we needed to change something. Truly.
And I'm wondering, I appreciate the law enforcement folks who just spoke today. Why haven't we heard more from people in support of who are opposed to the PAB or the idea of it, they're out there, and I'm wondering why we haven't heard anything from any of them, including, you seem to have not gotten many
So
comments either.
we sent out a mailing. We had 250 mailing addresses and emails. And with the hard copy mailings, we sent out 2 copies because we knew we weren't going to get everybody. And we asked whoever the recipient was of the first one to find somebody else to pass it along and know that this process is going on. All I can say is that there has not been a single comment that I've read that supported the way it's written exactly today.
I'm just finding it curious that we're not finding other points of view presented here. And I'm wondering where those people are, including some of our elected officials, who I think would probably be opposed to the idea of a PAB. Is it because they feel that things have already been decided, and so,
Yes.
and in a way that in the way they want it to be decided, so therefore they're not going to need to say anything, or what goes on with that?
Over the gubernatorial veto override of April 10th, 2021, we will have a police accountability board effective July 1, 2022. What that looks like is what we're asking the community to tell us. How does it look? Does it mean that if we go too far, what are the unintended consequences? Is it that they're not accountable? Or if we go too far the other way, does that mean that we lose law enforcement officers and we don't have a sheriff's office of any substantial merit anymore? We have to balance that. And how do we balance that is what we're asking for input on.
Yeah, well, that's what I was wondering about. Where's the balance in even tonight's discussion? I'm in favor of a PAB, totally, and a civilian-run PAB. I think that a lot of the pushback against the idea or the wanting a lot of police and law enforcement presence on a PAB comes from a feeling that the public really isn't equipped to handle the cases that they may have to weigh in on and may not know enough about things. And I totally disagree. I mean, we have heard from a lot of articulate, intelligent people tonight who've thought long and hard about this. So I think we have a great pool of people to choose from. I just wondered, where are all the other folks?
Thank you. Yes, sir. Then I see we have, after your comments, I see we have 2 hands raised in Zoom, so, but please.
Okay, I'm going to try to be pretty succinct. I want to follow up on what my brother Al Hawkins had to say. He was my commander when I was an investigator in internal affairs. During my course in internal affairs investigating allegations of misconduct against police officers and civilians, I investigated 108 cases. Out of those 108 cases, I was either the arresting officer or the assisting arresting officer in 12 cases that went from conspiracy to commit contract murder all the way down to child abuse and domestic violence. Okay, I'm not saying we don't need a police advisory board or a police accountability board. We do, and I support it. I want you to know, okay, that internal affairs and internal investigations do find people involved. They do find people guilty, so to speak, okay? Also, I investigated 8 shootings, okay? So I've got a lot of experience when it comes to that. I heard some comments tonight about death in custody in Calvert County. I've lived here since 1987, and I don't know of any death in custody cases in Calvert County. Police shootings, I know that there was a police-involved shooting maybe 10 years ago down somewhere in close to Lusby on Route 4, so I don't know where that's coming from. One of the reasons that we enjoy the lifestyle that we have in Calvert County is because of a proactive police department, making traffic stops, making Terry stops, doing investigative stops. These are the things that keep us safe in Calvert County, okay? That's number one. Number two, with proactive policing, one of the things that everybody has the opportunity to do is comply now, complain later. And we would avoid a whole lot of negative contact, okay, between police and the community if we just understood that. Also, I didn't interrupt you, dude. Also, I want to go one step further with what Al said. Is Mr. Kent from the NAACP. When I worked in Prince George's County, we used to have an open dialogue with them. When they would get a complaint, they gave it to us to investigate. They didn't hold back and wait to a community meeting. They gave it to us to investigate. And there were times when we did find misconduct, but there was times that we didn't. Also, with regard to police oversight, I think it's great. You're a lawyer. You want me sitting on a board determining whether you provided a good defense for somebody? And who is an attorney's best friend when somebody charges them with some kind of post-conviction hearing? Another attorney. Do we have civilian oversight over the American Medical Association? Maybe we should, and some people suggested that probably we should. And to address, I don't know where she is, talking about old people, and we won't be here in 20 years. I just want to quote one of my all-time favorite comedians, Richard Pryor. You don't get old being a fool. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a new Zoom caller who hasn't provided comments previous.
Tracy, I am going to ask you to unmute yourself. Please push *6 to unmute your phone.
Thank you so much. I just want to add my comments to the other comments this evening. I don't believe that the commissioner should have legislation that tightly narrows who can apply to be part of this the PAB board. So I suggest that the criteria to apply is that you be a citizen of Calvert County, a high school graduate, and at least 18 years of age. And if you have a felony and you have served your time, paid your debts to society, you should not be barred from serving. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. I see. Kate?
Yes. Kate, I am now asking you to unmute your phone. Please push *6.
Thank you. I just had a personal comment, just from myself, not from my organization. There's been a lot tonight about background checks and how we need to make sure that folks are, qualified to oversee the police. And how would you feel if someone was telling you how to do your job? I'm a tour guide in a park. I have to be accountable to the public. I can't just be saying wrong information about the park. I can't be saying things that are racist or homophobic or what have you. People can complain. That's a very common thing in other industries. And the fact of the matter is, I don't carry a gun. I can't kill anybody. I can't put people in prison and completely ruin their life. And I still have to have that level of accountability. So the police should have a much higher level of accountability. Now, going back to the background check situation, the fact of the matter is that what we consider to be a crime is culturally defined. It's not entirely objective. Just tonight we heard from a speaker whose family is being harassed. And that person, even though they're not complying with a lawful order, that person isn't being convicted of a felony, right? Because we've decided in society that is not a felony, right? That's not to say that, so what is a felony and what is a criminal conviction is not always the same as what's morally right. If you're a company and you poison the water, that's not a felony either. You just get a fine. So it has no bearing on whether or not somebody is morally capable of understanding the circumstances when someone has crossed the line. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate.
Good evening. My name is Toby Mako. I'm from Sunderland, Maryland. Lived and raised here all my life since 1975. First, I want to say thank you to the police officers that are here and all the police officers on the force. Hey, we need a police. We need the police, right? We need the police, but we also need accountability. And there's a couple things, in my opinion, that are wrong with the police. It's an attitude, it's an arrogance, and people pick up on that stuff. And we just gotta police it up. As citizens, we have to police it up. A couple months ago, I called the police officer. I called the non-emergency number to report that we've been having a problem with this one gentleman with my family. There's been over 20 incidents where the police were called out to push off Station Road. And do you know when I asked to speak with the sergeant, actually the person I spoke with was a fellow classmate of mine, you know, and I didn't ask him for any favors because I knew him. No, I said, hey, could you relay to the sergeant or to the lieutenant that I'm just requesting a meeting so we can talk about this issue? Because this gentleman continues to call the police and use the police and inform citizens that he has the police in his pocket. So this police accountability board is important because there's a brotherhood that exists within the police department. The internal affairs are members in some capacity of the police department. They're the last ones you want investigating what the police do, because at the end of the day, they're a brotherhood. So with that said, the citizens trust the police and respect the police, okay? We need the police also respecting and trusting that every citizen that you come across is not a criminal, does not have a gun. It's not gonna hurt you. You got the upper hand, you got the gun, okay? But we've got to work together, figure out a way to work together, okay? This accountability board is a way to go. I think having anyone that's associated with the police department or maybe like someone said, recent years associated with the police department or even the military, I think that's a bad idea. I think it needs to be some time separated from it, okay? But the whole point is objectivity, not subjectivity. So that's all I have.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Robert Holland from Prince Frederick. I want to say something, and I hope it doesn't come up wrong. There's a disconnect with Black America and the police, and that disconnect has been there from the inception. So I think when they go through their training, they should go back and review how the police got started. The police are different things to different people. They were never in the beginning for us. So we were trained or taught or grew up understanding that the police were bad. And so they have to change that culture. And I'm not saying how or why, and I'm not saying cops are bad, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying they don't know the history of what they represent and how they got to be who they are and why they are who they are. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am. How are you?
Good evening. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I would just like to say, on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Calvert County, we would like to applaud you and the commissioners for having transparency. We do hope that you will keep it with all of us, keeping us informed. And one thing that hasn't been mentioned this evening is that I think we are all obligated, just because we're starting and getting the structure, we have got to monitor it, and we have all got to be willing to come back to the table to make adjustments. And my hat is off to Calvert County this evening because the eyes are on us. At least we're taking the initiative to have a town hall to talk about it. So our eyes are on us. We may not get it right the first time, and I'm saying that we're going to have to monitor it. We are going to have a conversation. And this is the beginning. And I think this is the beginning also for all of us to understand that we have got to talk. And some of the things you didn't like tonight, it's reality. And the only way that we're going to change it is that we keep coming back together to this table. And we can make Calvert better. We can do that. But we can't do it, everybody on this side, that side. If we haven't learned anything from looking at DC or looking at our congressman, we all have to compromise. That's all we're asking for. And I do truly, once again, appreciate you all giving us the opportunity. Let's keep this conversation going, and we can get there, but it's going to take all of us to give and take. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, we were quite jealous. The League of Women Voters, for those who didn't get an opportunity to attend, had over 150 participants in your discussion on this topic. So we learned quite a lot, and we were listening. So thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm Joe Boschert. I'm from Lusby. I've lived here since '89. I grew up here. My mom worked at Calvert Mercantile Bank. You may have known her. I've been flipping through this, and I don't see that there's any protections in this document for people who may bring complaints against the police. And I believe that the commissioners should consider putting that into this governing document so that regardless of who is on the board or how it's made up, that the people who bring the complaints are protected from retaliation or undue surveillance or intimidation, because it's important for a fair process. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Scott Kincaid. I've lived in Calvert County for 4 years, and before that I was in Baltimore for 15 years. And first of all, I really like that last comment. Very interesting. I agree with all the people tonight who spoke about a board of citizens. When I first started reading about this process, I thought this needs to be citizens who can help make these decisions. I'm not opposed to having professional requirements for part of the board, but I don't think that should be the majority of the board. And I think whatever requirements there are, after those are laid out, then the demographic goals should apply to the entire board. The way it's written now, it's enumerated, so you have some professional requirements, then you have some ethnic goals, and then you have the clergy and the mental health practitioners. So if you read it the way it's written now, a lot of people would be excluded. You might be able to say over half of the county would be excluded from participating because they don't fall into those bins. I'm not opposed to having law enforcement representation. We all want an impartial board, and I think impartiality means that there should be people that would understand things from the law enforcement point of view. They've had similar experiences, they understand the procedures, etc. At the same time, we don't want any block on the board to be able to steamroll the remainder of the board. So I'm not opposed to law enforcement. I don't think they ought to be able to dominate. I don't think any group ought to be able to dominate. In relating to that, a couple people brought up with regard to law enforcement, the pressure that they would feel. Well, I think we can all agree that everyone on this board would feel tremendous pressure. We've all seen terrible events on TV over the last few years and longer than that. Every person on that board is going to feel like they're making very important decisions with a lot of expectations from their friends and colleagues, and they've got to go home and say, I looked at the facts, I made a decision that I thought was right. So people with law enforcement experience are going to face that. People who maybe feel more in common with the person making the complaint might feel that, and everyone in between. So I think that kind of pressure is a consideration, but it shouldn't drive excluding anyone from the board. So thank you for putting on this event. Thank you for working on this, and thanks everyone for commenting.
Thank you. If there are no more comments, I'll certainly be available after this event's over. Our contact information, or my business cards on the back table. Anybody that signed in will receive notice of when this goes to the Board of County Commissioners. We have found that there is quite a response to the survey, so we're targeting November 9th as the date to report this out to the Board of County Commissioners. And I believe we have some closing remarks from the President. Thank you.
So thank you, John, for moderating tonight. Again, we want to thank all of you for coming out. And if we didn't emphasize enough in the beginning, the draft that was sent out was Commissioner Hutchins' proposal as he was leaving office, but it accomplished our goal. We gave you all something to shoot at, which was what we really needed. Instead of coming in with a blank slate, at least you had something in front of you to poke at, and your comments will help us as we move forward. So, John, I'm not sure if he mentioned, the deadline for us is June of next year to have this in place. We've also been told there's probably going to be changes this coming legislative session.
So it puts us in a real box of, putting together a board, and then come April, new legislation comes out and could change everything we've already done. But we have to move forward because we do have a deadline mandated in the current legislation of June of 22 to set these boards up. It's not a choice. We have to do this. So that's why nobody's out here talking against it. It's already law. It's going to happen. And so we have to do this. Our goal is to get as much input as we can to make sure that it meets the needs of most. As someone said, nothing gets done without compromise. We are not going to come up with anything that everybody's going to be completely happy with. What we want is something that everybody can buy into. So our goal is to move forward. We have until June, as I've said. In government time, that's quick. That's what I've learned sitting in that chair on Tuesdays. In government time, next June is really quick, because once we come up with the draft of the makeup of the board, then we're going to advertise for people that want to sit on the board. We've got to go through all those applications. I think there's going to be more than a few, and figure out who meets those needs of the board and get them appointed, get them trained, and get it up to speed by next June. And that's quite a task for local government. So the only other thing I will say is Mr. Kent mentioned people have concerns that are afraid to go to the police department. When I hear that out in the community, I tell people, you come to us. We will make sure, the sheriff doesn't work for us, but if you need somebody that you feel you're not being represented, please come to us. We will see that your concerns get relayed. Oh, we have another speaker. I remember you already. I'm president of the Board of Commissioners.
So I sent an email last week to the county administrator. Is that person in here tonight?
He's not here.
Okay. Well, I sent an email and also to your contact form on behalf of the Holland family, and we are requesting a meeting with you regarding the many issues we are having with the police in this county and a said persons. So since I have the mic and the floor and the audience, would you be able to respond to my email by October 15th, like I asked last week?
It's Friday.
Oh, really?
It's
I got it all now? Okay.
Yeah, we can definitely have a response to you by Friday. We have heard your case. It's not
If it's
unfamiliar.
stuck in legal, you'll never hear.
We just want to be able to sit down and talk to those persons in place. I believe that Calvert County needs to have a county executive. That's part of the problem now. That's another discussion.
That's a different day, different town hall meeting.
But we are requesting a meeting with you regarding many of the issues I've discussed. There's a lady with a child who has disabilities that require 24-hour care, and she's being harassed, and gates are being locked, and the emergency response vehicles cannot respond to her. So we want those gates removed, and we're expecting you to make sure it happens.
So I can't promise you a solution to your issue by Friday, but I can promise you a response by Friday.
County ordinances state that you cannot put gates up without a legal permit if you do not obtain one.
We'll work through all that.
Because I will be here.
I promise. So once again, I want to thank especially the Zoomers who Zoomed in, and all of you that came out. We greatly appreciate you giving up your time, your free time, to come out and help us work on this issue. So everyone have a safe trip home.